When you think about businesses that are selling through the roof, like Skims or Allbirds, sure, you think about a great product, a cool brand, and great marketing. But an often overlooked secret is actually the businesses behind the business, making selling and for shoppers buying simple. For millions of businesses, that business is Shopify. It's home of Shop Pay, the #1 checkout in the world. You can use it to boost conversions up to 50%, meaning way less carts going abandoned and way more sales going through to checkout. Upgrade your business and get the same checkout Allbirds uses. Sign up for your $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/income, all lowercase. Go to shopify.com/income to upgrade your selling today. Shopify.com/income.
Hi everyone, I'm Deb Flaschenberg. Welcome to Yoga, Birth, Babies, a podcast produced by Prenatal Yoga Center. We will be diving into everything prenatal yoga, birth, and baby related, hoping to inspire, educate, and empower you through your journey into motherhood. Thank you for listening.
Hi, I'm Deb Flaschenberg, and I'm your host of Yoga Birth Babies. And today we're going to talk about self-regulation, dysregulation, and how as parents, when we are dysregulated, how does that impact our children and their development and our relationship with them? So I have Dr. Amber Thornton. She is a licensed clinical psychologist and author of A Parent's Guide to Self-Regulation, a practical framework for breaking the cycle of dysregulation and mastering emotions for parents and children. Dr. Amber is a strong advocate for mental health and well-being of parents. She loves writing and creating content online that will speak to the everyday struggles of motherhood and parenthood. It was such a great conversation with Dr. Amber. We really dug into even defining self-regulation and then talking about dysregulation, common signs of dysregulation, how it impacts our relationship with our children, common myths around dysregulation. And then we started to go into breaking the cycle of dysregulation and then diving into what's called the PCR method and how that can help parents regulate. I thoroughly enjoyed this conversation. I'll be honest, I related to this conversation, and I think it's going to resonate with any parent that has felt frazzled, overwhelmed, anxious, nervous, having a challenge when things are happening around you or you're noticing just that internal dysregulation. I think this is going to be really helpful for any parent at any age, and I'm excited for you to hear this conversation. Now, before we get to that, I always love to give updates about what's happening at Prenatal Yoga Center. So the best way to keep in touch, actually, it's to join our newsletter. I send out a weekly newsletter. It has usually a video involved, conversation about the podcast, just some tidbits I like to give out, and you can find how to subscribe for that on our website. Also on our website, we've got our schedule, our class schedule, our workshop schedule for in-person and our online. And we just started to get all of our teacher trainings for the next year ironed out. So we have a lot going on, and I'm excited for you to take a look at that. I also want to thank all the people that have listened to the podcast and applied to be guests. It's fun getting to know the community out there. We've been having a ton of birth stories and really just wonderful guest applications. So thank you for that. I would like to ask you, the listener, to leave a rating and review. I know it shouldn't matter, but it actually does matter. So if you can take a moment, leave a rating and review, it's going to help people find us, and then we grow our community. All right, that's enough from me. We're going to take a super quick break. When we come back, please enjoy my conversation with Dr. Amber.
Tonight, turn down the noise of the day and focus on the rest with AGZ, the nightly drink for winding down and resting up. New from AG1. AGZ supports your body's natural sleep cycle with clinically studied key herbs, adaptogens, and minerals in amounts supported by research. And no melatonin, helping you wake feeling rested. Wind down, rest up with AGZ. Learn more at drinkagz.com.
Hi, Dr. Amber. How are you?
I am doing great. How are you?
I'm doing really well. I am so excited to have a chance to speak with you. I found you on another podcast, and as I was listening, I think I was maybe 15 minutes in. I'm like, oh, no, Deb, you got to find this woman. You got to find her. You got to book her. We have to have a conversation. So this is exciting. So I guess before we jump in to our topic, I'd love to learn a little bit more about you
Mhm.
and what led you to focus on self-regulation and parent-child emotional dynamics. I actually think it's really fascinating.
Oh, perfect. Yes. Well, first, I want to say thank you so much for having me on your
Oh,
podcast.
thank you.
I'm excited for the conversation. And I just think it's a good conversation to have because it tends to be something that parents are really able to resonate with. And
Hmm.
I'm just glad we get to talk about it.
Thank
Uh,
you.
so, a little bit about me. I am a clinical psychologist based in DC, but practicing telehealth therapy across 40 states in the US. And I'm also a mom. I have two small kids. My oldest is actually graduating from kindergarten tomorrow. So I'm
That's a big
kind of,
deal.
yep,
That's
just
sad.
emotional mess. I
Yeah.
know. Just
I cry at all these little
yep,
graduations.
fighting back tears every day, but we're excited. Things are going well. My youngest is 4. My husband and I, we live in DC, and I love my life. I love my family. And I think that is what really has drawn me to this work in the parenting realm. But funny enough, I always tell people I was a psychologist before I became a mom, before I became a wife. And even then, I was interested in parent and family work. I got my psychology degree. A little over 10 years ago, and my specialty was family therapy, child therapy. And back then, the reason was I just saw how precious children were. And I saw how important it was for them to have a really good life.
Mm.
But then as I got older and I became a parent myself, something shifted for me. And I realized that a big part of making it so that children can have a good life is that parents also need to have a good life as well. And so that's what kind of shifted my focus a bit. But me ending up writing about self-regulation was actually not of my doing. The funny story is I knew I wanted to write a book. I was working with the publisher and I wanted to write something completely different. But the publisher, said to me, they were like, hey, what about self-regulation for parents? And I almost said no because I, at the time, had an infant and a young toddler. And my big secret was I was struggling with trying to keep everything together, keep my cool. I was the parent who struggled to keep herself regulated. And so something in me, though, said yes, because I felt like this was a really great opportunity for me to grow in this area. But then also I could see how it was so important for parents who might be struggling with the same. So life kind of forced me to do it. And I'm really glad that I said yes, because I grew so much with writing that book. And in the year that the book has been released, I get to see other people grow and just, feel so good about the fact that this is something we get to talk about now. And I like to continue the conversation because but this is not something that only I've struggled with. It's something that many, many parents struggle with in all walks of their parenting journey.
This is fantastic because I feel like people have been dysregulated for, ever, but
Hmm.
we finally put a name on it and an understanding of this is what's happening
Hmm.
and these the effects on our relationship with our kids and the effects on ourselves. So it's exciting to see progress because I think throughout history, it's not like people just got dysregulated. I think we
Hmm.
finally have an understanding of what it is. But let's actually, for those that are new to the concept, can you define self-regulation in context of parenting?
For sure. So, with self regulation, first, it could be helpful to kind of step out of the context of parenting and realize that ideally everyone has access to or can have the ability to self regulate, which is really just to regulate yourself. And that might be emotionally regulate yourself, it could be physically regulate yourself, or cognitively regulate yourself. And really, that just means when you're feeling aroused. So, like if you're getting emotionally upset, or if physically there's some sensation you're having, or if your mind is racing, are you able to bring yourself back to your baseline? And do you know the tools that can get you back to your baseline? Or do you know how to seek composure or to reground yourself? That is essentially what self-regulation is. And so in the context of parenting, for parents, it really means in those high stress moments, or when things are feeling tough, or when you are going through a hard time, are you able to feel those feelings or have that experience while still being able to bring yourself back to the center or bring yourself back down to your baseline?
I love this. This is actually really similar to some of the tools I use as a yoga teacher, but also back when
Hmm.
I was a doula. And I would call it when when I'm dysregulated, and I can't be if I'm with my kids or whatever,
Hmm.
I call it dueling myself.
Mm.
Like, I'm finding my breathing, I'm finding my mantra, I'm feeling my feet on the floor.
Yep.
But it's literally having to get in my own head and make that decision
Right.
to change the channel.
Hmm.
So, what are some of the most common signs that a parent is dysregulated and they may not even realize it?
Hmm. So a lot of times when the parent doesn't yet realize it, it's things that maybe other people notice, or it might be things that your your children even might say to you, depending on their age, or it might just be this mismatch in terms of who you want to be or how you imagine yourself as a
Hmm.
and what's actually happening. So for instance, your spouse or a partner or a friend might say, "Hey, I'm noticing that you seem more irritable." Or you're a little withdrawn, or you're a little more quiet, or you seem on edge. There's something that they're noticing about you that might indicate that there's some stress, or you're not handling things as well. Even my child has said at one point, "Mommy, you seem frustrated," or "Mommy, are you nervous, or are you angry?" And so you might hear these comments from your children about your presentation, or things that you're saying or you're doing. But then also for you internally, you might be feeling frustrated with yourself about, how you're showing up as a parent, whether you're noticing that you're snapping more, or you're yelling more than you'd like, or maybe you told yourself last night that you were going to have a more peaceful day. And here you are, it's already the morning, and things have not gone well, right? Or it could be emotionally, you just know you're not feeling well, or you're not functioning well at work, or you're a lot more distracted. There are these indications throughout your day, in your relationships and in your own experience, that kind of let you know that things don't feel at peace for you and you're not feeling grounded.
I love that you're giving wide ranges. I think sometimes we think of dysregulation just as tantrums, but I love that you're saying, you know, just a little irritable or nervous or can't focus. I mean, that's all dysregulation where
Mm-hmm.
we might have just one perception of it. But you also mentioned something about your kids noticing
Mm-hmm.
this. So, how does a parent's ability to self regulate impact their child's emotional well being and development?
Yes, tremendously, actually. And no, it's because our children, and I'm sure that your listeners know this. As soon as I say it, they'll be like, "Yes, our children watch everything we do. They
Yeah,
look,
and they
they,
call us on it too when they're old
yes,
enough to do so.
yeah, they listen to everything we do, even when we don't know it. They're soaking up everything, and it's because in every single moment that we are with them, and even when we're not with them, we're modeling something for them.
Hmm.
And when it comes to our emotional health, or our emotional well-being, or emotional maturity, emotional intelligence, how we navigate emotional experiences is what they soak in and what they learn. It also is the makeup of our relationship with them. Not all of it, but it's a big part of that. So it impacts them tremendously, because it's essentially the seeds and the tools that they are receiving for planting and cultivating their own emotional garden. But then it's also the big parts of their primary relationship, which is with us, and then how they then do relationships with other people.
So that then makes me think, because I know it's usually when I'm tired or at night
Hmm.
where I'm not behaving at my best. Like the other night, so my son's 13. I thought he left his light on in his room, and I
Oh.
went in to shut it off because sometimes he falls asleep that way. But no, he
Hmm.
was up and it was almost 2 a.m.
Oh
And
no.
I can tell you, I was a little bothered. I
Hmm.
was half asleep. I was not expecting that. And I'm like, Sam, shut your light off. And he's just like, no, I'm still up. I'm like, so it did not go, I did not
Hmm.
emotionally regulate well. So
Hmm.
what are ways that we can break the cycle or acknowledge maybe, I don't know if in the moment we can acknowledge it, maybe we can, but how do we break the cycle of this dysregulation, and how can we help when these real life parent moments happen?
Yep, that's a good question. And I know we're going to talk about the method that I talked through and worked through in
Yes.
the book. So I know we'll get to that. But I want to say that the very first step, because when we talk about breaking cycles, whether it's cycles of dysregulation or cycles of anything else, we have to acknowledge that it is a process. And sometimes we think that just the motivation we have in that moment and, the intention we're experiencing is going to be enough. And it's not. And I say that because I don't want people to become frustrated when they set this intention to break a cycle, but then it continues to happen, because that is part of the process. And the very first step is really just identifying it and being aware of it and recognizing it. And so when I'm working with parents around, these topics, and when we're talking about how do we break a cycle or how do we break a habit, I often will literally force them to just, hey, I don't want you to change anything. All we're doing is recognizing when things happen this week. That's it. We're just recognizing when something happens. So for your example, it might be something like, in the next week or so, I just want you to recognize when you feel that type of frustration. You
love
don't
that.
necessarily have to do anything different, but I just want you to be aware of it, recognize when it happens, get really familiar with the reaction that you're having so that you get as much information about it as possible. So then we can start to dissect it a little bit more. So the first step is always your awareness. And the more we are aware and insightful about something, the better chance we have at being able to break a cycle or a habit of it.
So let's go deeper into that, because I want to kind of pull this apart, because I know it's something you talk about in your book. So I notice the agitation. I just woke up. It's 2 a.m. Other parents probably having something similar. They're peaceful. They come in and their child just wrote on the wall or whatever it is. So first we notice. And then what are the next steps after noticing? Because the notice is great, but the reaction also can be split second.
Yep. I gotcha. And so after you start to recognize and notice, following that pretty quickly after is we want to try to build some space in between what you're experiencing and then what your next step is. And so with this, it again, I hear what you're saying. You're saying, I have this feeling, but it's instantly I have this reaction.
Right.
Or, some people might say, immediately these words came out of my mouth and I didn't want to say them, but they came out anyways.
So you do live in my head. I get it. Okay, good. So we're there.
No, I'm a mom, so I get it. I'm a mom. And so after, again, we've gone through that experience of recognizing, being aware. Next is, can we start to build some space or create a pause between what you're experiencing and how you're going to respond or react to it? Okay. And so again, that feels hard because a lot of times, especially for women and mothers, when we feel a feeling, it feels like we need to do something next, or there's this urgency to it, especially when it comes to our kids. But we then have to kind of make this commitment to, hey, I feel this feeling, but I'm going to give myself some space to think it through or to be more intentional or aware of what my next step might be. And so going back to your example, in that moment, it might look like something like you wake up, it's 2 a.m. You notice that the light is on. You're already a little irritated because, again, it's 2 a.m. We're tired. We need to go to bed. You go to your son's room, realize he's still up.
Yep.
Building some space and a pause would be you pausing in that moment, realizing you're frustrated, and maybe you deciding to walk away in that moment. Or just close the door, give yourself a 5-minute breather to kind of think about what's next. This is what I feel. What I feel is separate from what I'm going to do next. Or somebody might decide, hey, I'm going to go back to bed and we will talk about it in the morning. But either way, that pause, that space might look different for everybody, but it will definitely allow them to come to a different conclusion or a different action because they took the pause.
All right. So I have heard that. I was hoping it would be easier.
It's not.
And the funny thing is, I actually teach that in yoga, like take the pause, be in the pause, take a breath. But it is so hard to take
It's
that
hard.
pause. It really is, because the instant's like, go to sleep, because I immediately think of like, you're going to be tired tomorrow. Everyone's going to be grumpy, but
Mhm.
it's about the pause. All right. So then that leads me to thinking about emotional patterns, because parents
Mhm.
carry emotional patterns from their childhood, because, that's just all people do.
Yeah.
So what are the first steps to recognizing those and shifting those patterns? Because I'm imagining that my baggage and patterns show up as a parent, and then it's going to affect, as we already talked about, the emotional
Mhm.
development of our kids.
Mhm.
So that's a big question.
It
There you
is.
go.
I was thinking that, like, woo, this is a
I threw a
bit.
big one at you.
And part of my answer was going to be therapy can be helpful
Yep.
because it
My
is
husband's a therapist. I'm well aware of this.
it's a lot to unpack. But and it actually made me think about what we talked about earlier, how we interact emotionally with our children is essentially the seeds and the tools that they then use to tend their own emotional garden. And so that same thing happened with you and your parents, or me and my parents. And so it can get kind of cloudy and confusing because we're navigating that relationship that we have with our children. We're trying to navigate our own emotional experience, but then we have to tease out what part of this is what we learned from our own parents. And so it's hard. But I think that what can really help people who want to do that type of work is one, an ability to self-regulate. And I feel like with this, I'm kind of probably preaching to the choir, because I feel like people who listen to your podcast are probably very self-reflective, and they are interested in that, and they do check in with themselves, and they do want to have a deeper understanding of their own experiences. But that self-reflection is so important because you need to be able to take a moment to pause and really think about your own experiences and how they relate to others, or the context with which you have experiences. But then to take it a step further, some reflection on your own early life experiences. And again, this is where therapy can be super helpful, because it can be hard to do this on your own. It's helpful to have another person who is objective, who has some training, who can kind of guide your experience so that you start to really better understand what were these early emotional experiences that I had. If your parents are still living, you can really start to dissect or analyze what's your relationship with your parents, or what's your relationship with your siblings, and or what was it like back then. I think that can also tell us a lot about some of the emotional dynamics that occurred, or relational patterns. And then what I like to do, because I do this with myself all the time, I think about, how is my early experience or my relationship with my family of origin, I call it, different from the family I'm creating now? Well, what are the differences? Where are the similarities? And what does all that mean? So honestly, therapy is so helpful. But I actually here's a resource. There's a book that I am reading that I actually think is a really good complement to my book. And it is called Adult Children of Emotionally Immature Parents.
Oh,
And that's
interesting.
a very heavy title, but it essentially is a book about what happens when you are an adult and you start to realize that maybe your parents were not as emotionally sound or grounded or stable as you needed. And then what are the consequences for you? So
That's
that
a
can
huge
be,
realization for somebody
oh, yeah.
to get to that reflective point.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I'm just kind of now seeing, like, going down this rabbit hole. You get to that emotional point where you, as the parent, or I'll just, although I actually think my mom was pretty great with this, but I'll use myself for
Mm-hmm.
example.
Mm-hmm.
So if I'm now checking in on myself,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm trying to understand my patterns and my regulation, and then to have that epiphany, you're like, wait a second, I've come to, whether we know it or not, emulate our parents. And then
Right.
to have that awareness, like, whoa, that
Mm-hmm.
parent may not have been that emotionally mature. That's a huge
Mm-hmm.
thing to come to, and probably a hard pill
Yes.
to swallow
A
too.
very hard pill to swallow. And even the author of that book often says in the book, therapy can be helpful in this moment because it can feel so hard. And people have a lot of defenses around viewing their own parent in a negative light. Even when there have been things like abuse and neglect, still people are very reluctant to just acknowledge that things did not go well. And so it's helpful to have a container and a space and a guide for that process because it's pretty heavy.
Yeah, I would imagine it'd be probably anger and disappointment and sadness feeling,
Yep.
because we all look to our parents as that guide and container. And then to feel like, wow, that was a leaky container, can feel, oh, that's overwhelming. And so on that note, we're going to take a break so we can shift gears a little bit. When we come back, I want to talk about the PCR method. So we will be right back.
Hey, it's Paris. You know, I love sparkly things, right? Like stars. Duh. And thanks to Hilton and AutoCamp, I just slept under them. Picture me serving looks by the fire outside my luxurious Airstream, making s'mores with the kids, while a national park is our backdrop. The great outdoors meets Hilton hospitality. That's hot. Explore all the new ways to stay at Hilton.com. Hilton for the stay.
This episode is brought to you by Nespresso and Samra Origins by the Weekend Coffee Collection.
Introducing Samra Origins. My collaboration with Nespresso is a connection to my roots, to my mother, Samra. Coffee that hits the right notes. It transports you. Crafted with unique notes and bold, soaring flavors. Experience a taste that moves you. Nespresso and Samra Origins.
Discover more at Nespresso.com.
Okay, so we're back. So what is the PCR method and how can it help parents regulate?
Yes. So when writing my book, and also part of the book, I got to talk to a ton of parents about their experiences of dysregulation. And as a psychologist, not only do I want to understand problems, but I need to be able to help solve problems too. And so I just, the big question was, what is helpful for parents in terms of this experience of dysregulation? And I realized that it wasn't just one thing. And there actually seemed to be 3 different approaches that would be effective either at some moment in a parent's life or putting them all together in total being really effective. And so that's where the PCR method came. And the PCR method is, you break it down into 3 different approaches that one can take to help solve this problem of dysregulation. And so the first part is the practical approach. So what the practical approach is a pretty step-by-step guide for how to help a parent to better understand when they're dysregulated, what the triggers for their dysregulation are, how to take that pause like we talked about, how to then figure out what type of supports they need, and then implementing those supports into their life. It's really getting them through the process of, these are my triggers, this is why I'm dysregulated, and these are the steps I need to take. It's a very practical approach. It might be one that if you were to go see a therapist who may be specialized in cognitive behavior therapy might take this type of approach. It is very, very structured and very step-by-step guide. And I find that a lot of people need that because it feels also kind of like education. It's like, hey, we're going to learn about dysregulation. We're going to identify the things in this moment, and we're going to make a plan. And I think that type of approach can also be really helpful because if I make a plan for my dysregulation when my kids are toddlers, but now my kids are in middle school, that plan's not going to work anymore. So I need a new plan. Right. And so this approach can be really effective because it makes you to stop and think and look at, how do I need to change my supports or my environment in any given moment? So that's the practical approach. The second part is conscious. So this conscious approach kind of takes it a step further. It's like, hey, we've got you the foundation. You know what dysregulation is. You know what your triggers are. You know what needs to be in your support bucket or what your tools are to give you more support in that moment. But now let's actually look at your early childhood experiences. So this might be a type of therapist you go to who really helps you to dissect what your childhood experiences are, and maybe help you to get to know who your inner child is. You know, this conscious part is really helping you to get more to the emotional center of why dysregulation happens for you. And for some people, it's not just about, the overstimulation, or it's not just about having so many things to do, but maybe it's more about this perfectionism that they picked up along the way because maybe they had really strict parents, or maybe it's about this guilt that they feel about a decision that they made, and they notice that it's coming out every time that their child does this one specific thing. Or maybe it's because they have some lingering resentment for a parent about a choice that they made that has impacted them. But it's really about these emotional experiences that continue to walk with us into our adult life that really need our attention. So the conscious approach is really asking you to become more aware of your
Very
emotional
brave.
experiences.
It's very brave to go there and dust off memories that may be a little bit, hidden because they were so long ago, but then to also look at these memories and think, what is the impact of them? They, if they were painful memories, they might have wanted to be pushed away, but then to feel like that memory is there, it keeps eating them. I mean, what does that mean? Ooh, that's brave. I like that.
Very brave and very necessary, because it's in parenting. I know I had this experience where there were things that maybe happened to me when I was younger, and I thought I was over it. It's like, I'm done with that. I've moved on. I'm good. But then I became a mom, and things
it's right next to me.
Yeah.
There it is, walking with me.
It just completely resurfaced in this whole new way that took me by surprise.
Wow.
And that happens for a lot of parents, a lot of women, a lot of mothers, where the shift into motherhood resurfaces a lot of old baggage or old traumas. And it's like begging you to address it. And us not addressing it is kind of like popping out in our parenting experiences in ways that we don't understand. And so for the conscious approach, again, working with a therapist can also be really helpful, because it is pulling for a lot of emotional material, a lot of things that can be kind of unconscious that need to be worked through with someone else. But also it takes a lot of courage.
All right. And what's the R?
So the R stands for realistic. I love all of them, but this one is like, it's so good, because it's essentially like, okay, I've got my tools from the practical approach. I've done the emotional work in the conscious approach. And now the R is just realizing, things happen. I'm going to radically accept that after all of that, nothing is going to be perfect. I will never show up as the perfect mother that I have envisioned in my head. I probably will still yell sometime soon. There's probably going to be a moment where my daughter tells me I'm being mean. I'm going to forget something. I'm going to drop a ball. I'm going to make a mistake. That is all a part of this parenting journey. And so the R is asking you to radically accept and be very realistic about the fact that you will never be perfect. Motherhood or parenthood is not calling you to be perfect, and really for you to resist that urge to achieve perfection in this journey of healing or this journey of self-regulation. Perfection is not required, but rather we need to be really realistic and understand that all the experiences that we have, the good, the bad, the tough, the easy, the smooth, make up who we are as a parent, and this whole experience, this whole journey, all of it is necessary.
Oh, I love the realistic part, because sometimes I think again, I'll use myself, like I've done the work and then I show up and I'm like, it's still falling apart, like being realistic with oneself. So with that, how can parents start to build a daily or weekly self-regulation practice, even in the chaos of early parenthood, where you might be thinking, I just want to brush my teeth today. Like, the bar is so low.
Yeah. I mean, hey, start where you are. I think that is a magical thing. We often say in therapy is like, we always say you have to meet the client where they are. And similarly, you have to meet yourself where you are. And so that is probably a good first step. Many of us have such high expectations for who we want to be, who we should be, who we imagine that we should be, especially as a parent. And maybe the first step is looking at us realistically and what do I need? What do I need in this moment? And it might be, hey, I actually just need to brush my teeth. And so I think what does a self-regulation practice looks like? I think, thinking about all of the, let me take a step back.
Sure.
When I talk about the PCR method, often the next question is, okay, well, what's the first step? How do I get this into me? And so what I say is, think about these three different components. depending on who you are and where you are in your life, one of them might be more of what you need than another. So, for instance, there might be a parent or a mom who's like, hey, I just need some of the basic skills. I don't know what to do when I'm overstimulated. I don't know what to do about all this noise. For her, it might be, hey, you need to start with this practical framework where you really every day consciously and try to think about, okay, what am I feeling? What are the triggers here? What steps do I need to take to bring in more support into my day-to-day life? That needs to be your focus. For someone else, it might be, hey, I've got support. Things are going pretty well with my family, but there's these old experiences, these old memories that I continue to have. And I know that that's just not allowing me to be present. And so for that person, I would say, hey, your first step to integrate a self-regulation practice into your life would be to give yourself space to actually engage with these old memories, this emotional stuff, this baggage. It could be in therapy, or it could be on your own, where you maybe do some journaling, you do some weekly meditation, where you give yourself a nice, safe space to engage and learn more about your emotional experiences and what's happening for you going deeper. For this other person, it might be, I just feel like I should be doing more, or I am not showing up how I want to be. It's a lot of shoulds and a lot of expectations for that person. They might need the realistic portion. And so for them, it might be, hey, your self-regulation practice is going to be affirming to yourself that you are worthy. You are good enough. You don't need anything more. And you don't have to be perfect. Nobody's perfect. And so that might be like daily affirmations around breaking down perfectionism, or it might be making mistakes on purpose. But for her, it might be really learning to accept the imperfections that come in her life. So again, it's tough because it really depends. But I would say start with that PCR method and thinking about where in the entire framework you feel like you need to start and going from there.
That is so good. So, as someone that works a lot with the idea of dysregulation and self-regulation, do you feel like there's any common myths about dysregulation or self-regulation that you want to address?
So there's a few of them in my book, and I think some of those are one that only children become dysregulated, because I think sometimes when
Sorry, I laugh because I didn't realize I was even audible. My brother and I, we talk about, looking at our parents and stuff. My brother and I made up a song for my dad. We called it Let's Pout. He's dead now. He won't hear this, but it was when we were younger, and we would, now I have words for it. Like we would trigger him and he'd get dysregulated. We made it worse by singing the song called Let's Pout.
Wow.
So yeah, parents can get dysregulated clearly.
Oh, that is hilarious. Oh my gosh.
I know. Anyway,
So
sorry.
funny.
I
No,
hijacked that.
that's a great memory. I'm just trying to imagine my kids doing that. And I feel like my kids are so silly. I could see them eventually doing something like that. But no, adults get dysregulated all the time, every single day, and especially parents. And so that is a big myth, because I think sometimes when we hear the term dysregulation, we imagine a toddler on the floor crying, but there's an adult version of that, and it looks different for everyone. And as a parent, you likely become dysregulated multiple times a week, if not in a day. It's not just a child thing. And it also doesn't mean that you're childish. Because I think that's this other thing. People feel a lot of shame around, hey, I just, I don't know how to control my anger, or I don't know how to control myself, or they say things like that, and as if it's bad or as if it's unusual. And it's so common. And so I like to break down that stigma and that myth around this doesn't mean that you're immature or that you're being childish or anything. This is normal. It's more so just means that there's some unmet needs here that we have to figure out. This other myth is that as a mother, you just kind of know things and you should know things and you should show up perfectly. And I think that logically, most of us know that that's not true, but then there's something still at the core of us that feels this dissonance when we don't experience like that perfectionism as a mom or as a wife. And so that I also like to break down, as a parent, none of what you're doing is innate. And you do need help. You will need help. And sometimes that might mean read some books or seek professional help. It does not mean that you are bad or wrong or doing anything bad if you need help. Help is required. So I like to break that myth down. And there's this other one that I write about in the book around multitasking. And this one makes me so upset. There's this idea that, as women and as moms, we do so many things at one time. All the while I'm watching that and I'm like, and this is why you're dysregulated. There's this pressure in our society to take on this identity of, I can do this and this and this all at the same time, or, we just multitask. That's really hard for your brain. Yeah. And it also is pulling on so many resources. And if you're feeling the pressure to multitask in your daily life, that is a fault of our society. And it means that we're putting too much pressure on women and mothers to perform. And that's not fair. And I don't think that it should become this thing that is part of our identity as, being a mom, being a woman means that you should be able to, and you can multitask well. That's not true. Cognitively, it's confusing. It causes a lot of cognitive dysregulation, emotional dysregulation. It's a very heavy burden to ask someone to constantly be multitasking, especially as a parent.
Yeah, and there's actually data talking about when you get pulled away from one task, trying to get back to the other. I can't remember. I think it was like 5 minutes of like trying to reorganize your brain to actually show up. And that's a lot of wasted time if we're constantly being pulled in multiple directions. So we're going to take another break. When we come back, what is one final tip or piece of advice you'd like to offer new and expectant parents? We'll be right back.
If you thought goldenly breaded McDonald's chicken couldn't get more golden, think Golder! Because new sweet and smoky special edition gold sauce is here. Made for your chicken favorites.
At participating McDonald's for a limited time.
Okay, so we are back, and you have children, you're a therapist, you're an author, you can pull from a lot. So I'm curious to see how you're going to answer. What is one final tip or piece of advice you'd like to offer new and expectant parents?
Ooh, I feel like every time I get this question, it's something different. And it really is based on what I'm feeling or where I'm pulling from in that moment. So first, let me just say everything we said today is valid, and whatever resonates for you, the listener, is where you should go and follow that and take that with you throughout your day and your week. But I think one final tip is lately I've been thinking a lot about community and just how essential and how important that is in this journey of parenthood, but then also exploring the topics of dysregulation. And I say that because when I was doing my research for this book, I got to talk to so many parents, and they really opened up to me about these struggles and these challenges. And many of them assumed that it was just them, or they were, feeling some shame. But if only they realized how many other parents I had talked. It was 175 people in my survey saying all the same things. And so it's not just you. And I think sometimes we need more community that feels safe and affirming to allow us to show our truth and share our truth.
Yeah, take the mask off and be yourself. And
of course.
I love that. Yeah. I haven't heard that in a while. Thank you.
So I really want parents to tap into a community, whatever that looks like, whether it is, at your kid's school or a church community or in your neighborhood. It's so helpful to have a community of parents that you feel open with and you feel safe to explore these topics and to really just be yourself.
Oh, I love that. That's actually one of the foundations of Prenatal Yoga Center is the importance of community. Where can people find your book and your work?
Yeah, so the book is called A Parent's Guide to Self-Regulation, and you can purchase that wherever you would like to buy books. People like Amazon, Target, Barnes & Noble, wherever you like to buy books is there. There's also a version on Audible if you prefer to listen to the book. You could also go directly to my website, www.dramberthornton.com, and you can purchase a copy there. You can learn more about me, working with me at my website, but I spend a lot of time on Instagram at Dr. Amber Thornton. So you can definitely come chat with me there, shoot me a message, and I'd love to chat with you.
Oh, this has been so wonderful. I really enjoyed talking to you. You're so down to earth, and really everything you said just resonated with me. So thank you for your time. Thank you for sharing your knowledge and wisdom.
Of course, thank you.
This has been an episode of Yoga Birth Babies, produced by Prenatal Yoga Center. You can catch us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and Periscope. I'm Deb Flaschenberg. Thanks for listening.